The first thing that caught my eye was the table. My mother only used fine dinnerware on Thanksgiving or Christmas. But tonight, the dishes glittered under the chandelier like a warning. Crystal glasses lined each seat, and a bottle of champagne sat in an ice bucket next to my father's Sunday dinner chair. It felt like the whole thing was staged, like I'd stepped into someone else's play without a script. I sat down, smoothing the napkin on my knee, pretending not to notice the arrangement. Julian, of course, was seated at the head of the table. My parents flanked him, smiling as if this were the norm. I took my usual place in the middle of the table, where no one would stare at me for long. Dinner began with a casual conversation that seemed superficial, so exaggerated that it didn't delve into anything deeper. My mother asked me about work, and I answered politely. My father poured champagne, even though we hadn't yet raised a toast. The bubbles rose, catching the light, distracting me until Julian cleared his throat. So, a picture of relaxation, he said, leaning back in his chair. I'm moving into my new house next week. His words came out casually, like announcing a new gym membership. My parents said it would be good for both of us. You won't be lonely in that big house, and I'll save the rent while I get settled. I gripped the glass of water so tightly that my knuckles turned white, as if the pressure alone were enough to immobilize me. The words stung, not because they surprised me, but because I wasn't surprised at all. I had seen the boxes in the garage labeled with Julian's things. I had heard my mother whispering on the phone about how perfect the timing was. Yet, hearing her announce it in front of me, as if I had already given my consent, made my chest burn. My parents' faces lit up, and they raised their glasses in celebration. My father's voice came through the clinking of the crystal. To new beginnings. Around the table, everyone raised their champagne glasses. Everyone except me. I carefully set down my glass of water, and my other hand touched the edge of the bag at my feet, where an envelope awaited its moment. Julian's smile widened, but I already knew the celebration was premature. I was prepared. I let the silence linger for a moment, feeling the weight of their toast pressing down on me like a challenge. Then I reached out, took the envelope from my bag, and placed it in the center of the table. The change in the room was immediate. Glasses stopped in midair. Mother's smile froze at the corners of her eyes. Father frowned. I have news too, I said quietly. My hand rested on the envelope, as if it were anchoring me to the table. I sold my house last Friday. The couple will finalize the sale in 30 days. For a moment, there was only the sound of champagne bubbles hitting the glass. Then Julian's flute slipped from his hand, crashing onto the hardwood floor, the bubbles spreading like a stain. He didn't move to clean it up. What? His voice broke, mixed with astonishment and anger. My father pushed his chair back forcefully, his legs scraping the floor. Sarah, don't exaggerate. You can cancel the sale. There's always a grace period. He waved his hand dismissively, as if papers and contracts could be erased with a gesture. My mother pursed her lips and said, Julian has already promised us that he will have a place to stay. You can't expect him to find a place in 30 days. I kept my fingers steady on the envelope. It's over. The word was heavy. Final. Across the table, Aunt Vera tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly, but she didn't speak. She simply watched, as if waiting to see how far this drama would go. My parents exchanged glances, their outward composure cracking slightly to reveal the panic lurking within them. Julian blushed, his mouth opening and closing as if he were wavering between arguing and shouting. I leaned back in my chair, and I felt the change wash over us. The rules of the game had changed, and for the first time, I wasn't the piece they could move. The calls started the next morning. Aunt Myra's number popped up on my screen before I'd even poured my first cup of coffee. Her voice was filled with disappointment, every word sharp as stone. I can't believe you're selling your house just to get revenge on your brother. He told us everything. You're leaving him homeless. I hung up before I could say something I couldn't take back. But the silence didn't last. Uncle Frank, then my cousin Paige, then even my dad's golf friend. Each one of them repeated the same thing, the same accusation. By noon, it was clear the story had spread far beyond my control. When I checked my Facebook account, Julian's post caught my eye at the top of my news feed. The hardest lesson in life is realizing that family isn't always there when you need it most. Be grateful for those who truly care about you. As for the rest, God knows what's in people's hearts. Dozens of comments followed, sympathy, anger, support. My mother's reply came below, shining like a seal of approval. We love you, son. We are always here for you. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding. The next day, I noticed a tense atmosphere at work. My colleague, Ellis Lane, was leaning against the wall of my office, his face grim. He said, I don't mean to pry, Sarah, but people are talking. Your brother went into the cafe downstairs and told the waiter that you fired him. The word got around fast. My face flushed, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. I said, he wasn't even living with me. But the words seemed weak in the face of the story already circulating in the house. By the end of the week, I stopped answering calls. All the voice messages were mixed together. Lectures laced with anxiety, disappointment disguised as advice. The noise increased as my own truth seemed to diminish with every attempt I made to express it. In the quiet of my kitchen, I stood surrounded by half-filled boxes. The evidence of my reality was plastered to the walls, while the outside world decided on its own version of my story. Accusations mounted day after day, but none of them knew the truth that I alone carried. Selling my house was not motivated by hatred, but by a desire to survive. Last spring, a storm ripped the roof panels off like paper, revealing 3 separate leaks. The contractor's bill came to $11,000, a sum that nearly left me speechless. I spent my vacation savings, borrowed a small amount, and convinced myself it was a one-off emergency. But the emergencies kept coming. A month later, the water pipe burst, flooding the yard and seeping into the basement. The municipality handed me the bill, $8,200. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, eating noodles straight from the pot, staring at the seeping damp patches on the wall, trying to hold back my tears. By June, the heating system had broken down. An additional $5,000 cost. I had completely exhausted my credit card balance to pay the deposit and begged for a payment plan. Every night, I sat at the table surrounded by bills and statements, writing down numbers in columns and recalculating them until the numbers vanished completely. The neighbors would wave to me in the mornings, perhaps seeing a composed and self-assured woman. They didn't notice the dark circles under my eyes that I couldn't hide, nor how I would make new holes in my belt instead of buying smaller clothes when stress overwhelmed me. I became adept at concealing exhaustion, and at smiling when I felt empty inside. One evening, as I was sorting through boxes, I came across a framed photograph from the day I bought the house. I was there on the porch, keys in hand, a wide smile of pure joy on my face. I ran my finger along the edge of the frame, recalling that irrevocable feeling of triumph and pride. I carefully rolled the photograph and placed it in the storage box, a reminder of who I was and a testament to what I had built. When the doorbell rang a few days later, I was still holding the tape dispenser, closing another box. The knocking was sharp and insistent, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. I knew beforehand, even before I opened the door, who would be standing there. My parents stood around Julian like a guard of honor, his expression grim but triumphant, as if he'd dragged them here to set me on the right path. "Sarah, we need to talk," my mother said, and walked in uninvited. My father followed, his gaze lingering on the half-filled boxes with disdain. Julian lagged behind, his arms crossed, his eyes darting swiftly between the stacks of closed containers like a thief taking stock of his losses. "You can't be serious about the sale," my father said in the authoritative tone he had used with me since childhood. "This is just a fit of anger. You'll regret it when you calm down." I didn't stop sticking the box in front of me. The sound of the dispensing machine cutting the cardboard was louder than his lecture, and for the first time I let it drown him out. My mother's voice shifted to its gentle tone, the one used with weak patients or unruly children. "Your brother needs stability. He's going through a difficult time, and you've always had plenty of time for him." I carefully folded the ends and pressed the ribbon with the palm of my hand. "Has anyone ever asked? I need?" The word startled even me, hanging in the kitchen like a strange object. My father frowned as if he hadn't heard properly. Julian sneered, muttering unintelligible words. "I need stability," I repeated more firmly. "I need to sleep at night without worrying about being swallowed up by another bill. I need to stop draining my savings on a house I can't afford to maintain. And I need to stop being treated like my life is just an extension of his." My mother blinked, her lips parting as if to argue, but she said nothing. My father cleared his throat, staring at the ceiling. Even Julian stirred uncomfortably, but his silence didn't last long. "This isn't fair," he said. I closed another box and placed it with the others. For the first time, I didn't look up to see their reactions. The sound of the cardboard being stacked on top of each other was enough to answer. They called it a family discussion, but the arrangements made it clear what awaited me. Chairs were arranged in a circle in my parents' living room, as if an introductory session was about to begin. My father sat upright, my mother beside him, while the remaining seats were filled with a group of uncles and aunts. Julian, meanwhile, sat relaxed, feigning ease like a wronged son. But I didn't come alone. Simone, my financial advisor, sat beside me with a neat file in her lap. Ellis, my colleague, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, his face serene. And Jane, my mother's old friend who had been quietly supporting me for weeks, gave me a reassuring nod. My mother began reading the text. "Sarah, we are worried. Selling your house like this is reckless, and it punishes your brother. He has nowhere to go." I opened my file and placed the documents on the coffee table, one by one. Roof replacement, $11,000. Water line repair, $8,200. Heating system malfunction, $5,000. These aren't whims, they're the reality of owning a house on your own. Silence fell over the room as I placed the bank statements on top of them, the balances dwindling with each page. Aunt Vera, who usually just watched silently, leaned forward. Her sharp eyes moved from the bills to Julian. I've seen this family save you from paying rent, cars, and credit cards. When will this end? Why is she always expected to shoulder more of the burden while you're drowning in debt? The color began to seep into Julian's neck. I'm unemployed, he said sharply. How long will this go on? Vera's voice was harsh. At some point, the responsibility must fall on those who deserve it. My father moved with annoyance. My mother pursed her lips, but no one rushed to his defense. Julian's chair slammed against the wooden floor as he stood up, his face contorted with anger. I don't have to sit here and get attacked. He then slammed the door shut, announcing his departure. A heavy silence fell. My parents exchanged glances, their confidence, which had accompanied them throughout the evening, now turning to anxiety. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking under the weight of their judgments. I gathered the remaining papers in my file, preparing for their next attempt. They returned 2 nights later, this time with forced friendly smiles. My mother carried a pie, as if sweets could soften the blow. My father spoke in the same mock-cheerful tone he reserved for tense negotiations, followed by Julian, who feigned careful gratitude. My mother began speaking as we settled down on my sofa, saying, We were talking. We think we've found a solution. Instead of moving in with you, why don't you help Julian get his own place? Just a loan to cover a down payment and a few months' rent. With your success, it won't cost you anything. My father nodded, eager to confirm the point. It's a simple gesture to maintain peace in the family. That's justice. I let them talk, then I took the file I had prepared. I said quietly as I pulled a single sheet of paper across the table, I can't give him money, but I can give him something better. Julian picked up the business card she had placed next to it, and frowned. What's this? There is a job opening at my company. It's a starting salary, but it's enough to cover the rent for a 1-bedroom apartment. I've already spoken with the Human Resources Department. They will interview you if you are interested. Before he could reply, my father's eyes fell on the spreadsheet beneath his hand. Line by line, it listed every financial aid Julian had received in the past 5 years. Rent payments, car repairs, credit card balances. At the bottom, a total was circled in red, over $30,000. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father stared at the person, his face darkening, not with anger at me, but at the irrefutable evidence before him. I said calmly, This is not punishment, it's the truth. Love is not endless rescue, it's teaching someone how to stand on their own 2 feet. The pie remained untouched on the table, while silence filled the room. For the first time, their confidence wavered, and I saw them as uncertain as I always had been. 3 weeks later, the movers carried my last boxes to the attic. The space was smaller than the house, but the sunlight streaming through the high windows made it feel more spacious than the walls ever could. The silence was different there too, no longer hollow but open. My new mortgage payment was about 1/3 less than what I'd been paying, and for the first time in years, my budget showed a surplus instead of a deficit. I spent my first night surrounded by unopened boxes, eating takeout food on the floor, and feeling a lightness I'd never known before. No pipes creaking, threatening to burst, no roof groaning under the weight of another storm, just clean walls and a future I'd chosen myself. A few days later, Simone visited me with a bottle of wine. She wandered around the attic, nodding towards the half-furnished rooms. You know this isn't running away, she said, handing me a glass. It's a wise choice. You're lightening the load before it overwhelms you. This isn't weakness, it's strategy. Her words touched me deeply, calming the doubt I hadn't voiced. I used to believe that patience was a sign of strength, but perhaps letting go was a kind of courage in itself. On Thursday evening, I walked into my first photography class, camera in hand. The room was bustling with activity. Students introducing themselves, tripods being adjusted and lenses being fitted. I sat in a seat near the back, feeling my nervousness give way to anticipation as the instructor spoke about light and shadow, and about seeing the world from a different perspective. By the end of the class, I had exchanged phone numbers with 2 classmates, both of whom were eager to practice together on weekends. I walked home through the city streets, camera slung over my shoulder, filled with hope. When I opened my apartment door, the boxes waiting to be unloaded were no longer a burden, but a new beginning. When my parents invited me to dinner again, I braced myself for the usual nervousness. But as soon as I entered the dining room, I felt something different. The table was simple, no fancy dishes, no champagne, just a roast chicken and a basket of bread. The atmosphere was more relaxed, less pretentious. Julian was already sitting, fiddling with a fork. When he looked up, something strange appeared on his face. After a pause, he said, I started training this week. Beginner training. Mostly paperwork and simple tasks. But it's a start. My mother's face lit up and she said, This looks promising. What kind of projects are they working on with you? He shrugged, clearly embarrassed. Social media campaigns. I learn on the job. For the first time, my father didn't ignore his answer or change the subject. Instead, he nodded and said, "Every job teaches you something. Keep working at it." I sipped my water, listening to our conversation without the usual accusatory tone. My parents asked me about the photography course, and for the first time in years, I sensed genuine, not fleeting curiosity in their eyes. Julian kept glancing at me as if expecting criticism, but I didn't. I simply nodded as he described his tasks, encouraging him without taking responsibility for his progress. The balance remained, delicate yet ever-present, like the fragile stem of a wine glass that could break if handled carelessly. As dessert was served, soft, cautious laughter spread around the table, but it was genuine enough to remind me that something fundamental had shifted. It wasn't a final solution. Not yet, but it was a start. Later that night, as I drove home, the memory of that simple meal stuck in my mind and carried me to what happened next. The attic felt warm, and inviting the night, I opened my doors to friends who had become like family. Ellis brought a set of board games, Simone carried a bottle of wine, and Jane arrived with her usual cheerful spirit, filling the room with laughter that echoed between the bare walls. We gathered around the coffee table, plates on our laps, stories flowing as smoothly as the drinks. For the first time, I felt surrounded not by obligation, but by choice. Later, when the others had left and quiet had returned to the attic, Julian remained standing by the window. His voice was low and hesitant. "Can you help me with the budget? I don't want to mess this up." I nodded, surprised by the weakness in his tone. We spread out his payslips and expense reports on the table. For the first time, I saw him take responsibility instead of shirking it. A few days later, my parents visited me. The conversation was halting, awkward, but different. My mother quietly admitted that they hadn't realized how much they had asked me over the years. My father didn't speak much, but his silence was no longer dismissive. It was reflective, hesitant. They didn't have answers, but they were willing to try. As I gathered the papers from Julian's budget session, I felt the truth settle quietly within me. The boundaries hadn't broken us, but rather forced us to grow into something new, fragile yet real.
अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा बेसर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना अब बहुत ही दूर भरता है अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सुहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा सर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना बहुत ही दर्द भरता है मेरे साए भी मुझसे अब जुदा होने को कहते हैं तुझे खोने की राहों में ये आंसू बहने लगते हैं कहाँ जाऊं कहाँ ढूंढूं मेरा वो साजो सामा तो मेरी हर एक तमन्ना तू मेरी रूह का मका तू लकीरों में नहीं लिखा जो तुमने ख्वाब देखा था वफा की इस कहानी में फकत एक गम ही लिखा था सितारों से भी पूछता है पता तेरा कहाँ होगा मगर खामोश है दुनिया कहाँ मेरा जहाँ होगा बस एक बार मुड़ के देख ले मेरी बेबसी की सूरत मुझे है बस रह गया दर्द का असर।